In the early 1900s, Heinrich Schenker developed a system of analysis that expounds on the one we've been learning on this show. So what is there to know about Schenkerian analysis? And can Matt convince Jeremy of its merits? You're listening to Music Student 101. And now your hosts, Jeremy Burns and Matthew Scott Phillips.
What did we just listen to? That was really nice.
Why, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is one of mine. That is one of my compositions.
Yeah.
That just recently got a premiere.
Was that when's the last time you had a composition premiered?
It was before COVID.
Before COVID, so.
Yeah, things have been kind of dead ski since COVID on that, but it's coming back.
Yeah.
A little by little, so yeah.
So what you guys heard was a live recording of that.
Yep.
And I was in the audience.
Yes, you were.
Trying not to clear my throat or anything like that. That was great, man, and well done. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
What's it called?
It is called Sic Praeterit Aetus. Thus does time pass. It is one of my 7 sundials movements. So Sic Praeterit Aetus was an inscription on a sundial. I wrote 7 pieces for that instrumentation based on inscriptions on sundials around the world.
That's great, man.
Yeah. It was a labor of love.
Now, in the past, we've kind of talked about this off and on, or hinted at it, or joked about it, or whatever you want to say.
Yeah, hinted at it, joked about it, warned, threatened with.
This is we're going to be talking about Schenkerian analysis.
Yes, we are,
and we're going to try and just dip our toes in the pool here.
Just dip our toes in just a little bit, not get into any of the super complex stuff, but just sort of the basic idea. Because there's a lot of misunderstanding, I feel like, around this theory.
Yes, Matt will be using much of this episode and the ones to follow to convince me that this is a worthwhile endeavor.
Yeah. And I am not deterred. Lots of people, when they first look at this, go, what even is this stuff? So, I'm quite used to defending one of my favorite theories.
Fair enough. So before we get into the social section real quick, one other thing I'll bring up is if you listen to the last episode, melodic dictation for the Phrygian mode,
yes,
you will notice a difference in the other episodes in that we used actual licensed music.
We did.
Now, we did learn after the fact that it isn't as cool as we were hoping it would be.
I was afraid of that.
No one's written us back. Lars didn't show up at my doorstep.
That's good.
But it wouldn't play on YouTube Canada for some reason, and it wouldn't play on just a couple of other outlets, but everyone should still be able to download through their regular podcasts.
Yeah, and you can always go to our website.
But also, we just want to know your opinion. What do you think? I felt like it did change the flavor of the show to a place where I was not familiar with because it was just so strange, but people might have really loved it. I don't know.
It kind of felt a lot more professional to me, like a lot more I don't know, something
licensed.
Yeah, a lot more licensed or media savvy, or something. I don't know.
Well, let us know what you think about that, guys, and maybe we'll do more of it. Maybe we won't. We'll see.
We'll see what happens.
The YouTube issues are kind of a strike against it, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Okay. So we have a new review. We have Rory Filer out of Canada.
One of the people who can't get it on YouTube Canada in the last episode. Sorry, Rory. Yeah. Maybe you get it some other way. Let's hope so.
Well, he'll get this one because we'll be using our own music on this one.
Okay, good. So,
what does Rory have to say?
Rory says, if you're searching for a podcast to learn about music theory, you've come to the right place. Music Student 101 features 2 congenial hosts who teach us listeners a lesson in a different aspect of music theory in each episode. There are many aspects, and correspondingly many episodes, and thankfully no end in sight. The episodes are recorded not in a dry academic way. Rather, they are cleverly disguised as a nerdy, thankfully, conversation between friends. Yeah, that was our disguise. That's super intentional.
We play nerds on TV, right?
Totally play nerds on TV. We don't nerd about this stuff like when we're just sitting around together, hanging out. Of course not.
Clipping my fingernails.
Yeah, right.
I'm going to call Matt up and nerd out.
That's sarcasm. We 100% do that.
Mm-hmm.
Hosts Jeremy and Matthew are experts in music theory, and they do an excellent job of transferring their knowledge to us listeners in a genial, chatty format. I discovered this podcast with a search on my podcast app, gave it a try, and haven't looked back. I'd recommend it to all listeners ranging from the mildly curious all the way to those with professional aspirations in the music industry. Thank you, Jeremy and Matthew. And thank you, Rory, for those kind words. That is very, very inspiring to hear that we have such a positive impact.
Yeah. Your reviews help spread our name around, positive reviews always put us kind of a little bit more up in the in the podcast world. Yeah, in the search engines.
Indeed.
So thank you very much, Rory. That was fantastic, and we appreciate it. We really do.
Yeah.
Now, another thing we appreciate is our Patreon patrons. If you go to patreon.com/musicstudent101, you can sign up, and for $1 or $2 a month, you can get onto the site and see all the cool extra content we have.
We have lots of extra cool stuff.
More to come very soon. And then for $3 or $4 a month, you get a Music Student 101 coffee mug plus all that.
Yes.
Or whatever drinkware we had with our name on it at the time. And then for $5 or more a month, you can get your own special episode where a lot of this content comes from.
Indeed, where we answer your music theory question specifically in no less than 15 minutes.
Yep.
It's usually a lot more than that because we tend to, nerd out.
We do. But and that's exclusive to the Patreon side as well. Okay, so let's talk about our Patreon patron today. We got Michael Serta out of Austin, Texas. Michael is a bassoon player. Now, he says he's a math guy, so he says he's ready whenever we are for the set theory discussion.
Wonderful. Yeah, there's one person.
There's one person.
That's the next big tackle. Once we tackle Schenker, the next big tackle is going to be set theory.
So we are doing this in proper order? Two different things, just two.
We're doing it in the order that I like.
Okay, well, that's
proper. To the extent that that's proper.
That's more proper than I know. So anyways, he began the bassoon at age 14 and continued into his mid-50s. And for 10 years during that time, he played in a woodwind quintet.
Oh, wow.
Now he's kind of shaking up things a bit. Michael says, I'm now trying to be a classical jazz guitar player. I started playing guitar because I watched the Beatles documentary Get Back and saw Paul McCartney compose Get Back from an idea. Oh, man. Have you seen that, by the way, Peter Jackson's?
Yes. Oh, man. Isn't that great?
Man, what a great thing that it was.
Yeah.
Michael continues, I want to be able to turn an idea into something people can listen to. I'm 64, another Beatles reference right there, and still have some time left. So here I am, playing an instrument with strings is a mind-blowing experience. Imagine more than one note at a time even. Chords! Music theory helps put names on things I hear. Thank you for your work, and thank you, Michael. Michael had a few ideas for future episodes. He said, country music, for example, what makes country besides lyrics about love, my dog, and a pickup truck? And what are common chord progressions?
That's a lot of it, honestly. Love, dogs, and pickup trucks is a whole lot of it. You take the chord progressions and it can be hard to distinguish. In modern country, there are a few things, that, but it's mostly like timbre and arrangement and things like that.
Oh yeah, Garth Brooks busts out a 7 of 2 and and Friends in Low Places, right?
He does.
So anyways, I don't just know that. I had to learn that for my band.
I covered that song once too. So that's
there we go. Anyways, he wanted to know the same kind of thing about rock and then jazz. Who's important? Why? What should I listen to? Who are the contemporary artists?
We can absolutely go on about that for a long time.
Same thing with blues. He likes Keb Mo.
Okay.
What's not to like about Keb Mo?
Absolutely.
We have been doing some blues episodes. We did blues part 1 and part 2.
Indeed.
We're continuing that. Episodes to come. And then improvisation. Man, that's a really good... I think we could do an episode on improvisation for sure.
Yeah.
We'd have to bring somebody in who knows what the hell it is.
Right.
Or how to do it.
That would have more authenticity if somebody who could actually improvise we're sitting here talking about it.
Matt and I are both bass players, and we don't get a lot of chance to play with melody. I say that. We can learn melodies all day long if we wanted to.
We can learn melodies all day long, but we don't get a lot of chance to improvise.
Or solo.
And we're pretty terrified when we do.
Yeah, because we have no practice. And then it comes up, and all of a sudden my toes curl and my jaw clenches, and it's a train wreck. I've gotten better at it, though, since I've been taking lessons with Taylor. Actually, I have.
Oh, good.
But I digress. So again, thank you, Michael Serta, our wonderful Patreon patron.
Thank you very, very much. We'll look into some of those.
Now we have a listener mail.
Listener mail from William Wilkerson.
Yeah, William is also on Patreon more recently. And he says he's been listening to the podcast for the past 6 months and is deep into the show.
Good.
Deep enough to also support us on Patreon, like I say.
Excellent.
He's recently retired from teaching philosophy at the University of Alabama at Huntsville.
Indeed, very close.
Yeah.
Neighbors.
And he has decided to get back to the piano after a 20-year break now.
Wow.
He's saying that getting a better grasp of theory has helped him enjoy playing more. Isn't that cool?
Yeah.
I found that to be the case.
I imagine it does.
That was the case for me. I just didn't think about it, but sure. He's mainly into 19th century classical music, which we might be talking a little bit about today, huh?
We're going to be talking a good bit about...
He mentioned Chopin, Brahms, and Schubert.
Yeah, well, if we get that far, this is our toe dipping into Schenker.
Yeah. So. Anyways, so he mentioned them, but he also mentioned he's working on Scott Joplin rag.
Ah, nice.
Is there anything more delightful than a Scott Joplin rag? If there is, I don't want to know. So anyways, he's requested clarification on one of our topics we've discussed. Matt?
So William says, after listening to some of the advanced episodes, particularly those with the augmented sixths and fully diminished seventh chords, I started to wonder what makes something the root of a chord. When you say that the fully diminished seven has no root, it's because the intervals remain the same in each inversion. So is something considered a root of a chord just because above it is stacked either a major third and a minor third, in the case of a major triad, or a minor third and a major third, if it's a minor triad. Putting the same question another way, is what makes something a root the ability of that root tone to play a role in inversions that have different intervals other than thirds? Or is it just a simple definition thing? A root is the lowest note in a major or minor triad. I feel like there is maybe some greater connections to classical tonality in general, but maybe I'm overthinking it. And that is certainly something I was trained to do. Me too, William. Trained to overthink some things sometimes. And you and I did both email William and have had a sort of private conversation going on. But for the sake of everybody else.
Sure.
So there is definitely a connection to classical tonality, and that all of these ideas kind of came out of classical tonality. The short answer, in my mind, is that the root of a chord is defined by asymmetry. What I mean by that is that if I take a good old major chord, let's go D major, and I go D, and I go major third above that to F sharp, and a minor third above that to A.
Minor third above the F sharp.
Yes. So that's 4 half steps up to F sharp, and then another 3 half steps from F sharp to A, right? And then there is 4 half steps. There's 5 half steps from that back up to the tonic an octave above. So there's a couple of things going on. One is we've got a well-defined fifth right here, perfect fifth even, which is going to lead to the stability of that chord. The other big thing that's going on is there's an asymmetry here. these intervals are not the same distance from each other. One is 4 half steps up, one is 3 half steps up, and then there's 5 half steps back to the octave from there.
Respectively, a major third, then a minor third, then a perfect fourth.
Right.
Right.
So you can then use that asymmetry to sort of suss out the fifth, and then call the bottom note of that fifth the root.
Ah, okay.
That's what makes the root knowable.
So, okay.
And that's what makes inversions possible. You can play that in any inversion that you want, and that asymmetry is still there. Mm-hmm. That fifth is still there. In this particular one, it's inverted as a 4. Hence, like 6/4 in figured bass, right? But those intervals are still there. That asymmetry is still there, and still recognizable. If I play D half diminished, which is going to be right, we still have a lot of asymmetry, right? So here we've got a minor third up and a minor third up, and then to this seventh is going to be a major third, and then only a second. So there's still a lot of asymmetry, and you can still suss out it's a diminished fifth now, but that fifth is still there. And, reinforce if you have that seventh, there's a second there too. You can sort of suss out what the root is given that asymmetry, right? On the other hand, if I play D fully diminished 7, I'm going to play D, I'm going to play F, I'm going to play A flat, and I'm going to play B, right? And so that is a up a minor third, and then up another minor third, and then up another minor third, and then up another minor third back to the octave. Yeah, so it's just minor third, minor third, minor third, minor third. There's no asymmetry there in which we can sort of look at the groupings and pick out the root. There's no fifth there to say, well, there's the bottom of the, it's just minor thirds. Just minor thirds all around. If we put those notes on the clock face, then we're going to have the notes 2, and then the note the note 5, and then the note 8, and then the note 11. Which which would just be dividing into 4 equal quarters. It's 0, 3, 6, 9 all shifted.
Yeah.
Right. So because of that symmetry, there's nothing that we can really say, look at the groupings of the notes and say, well, this looks like the root.
Yeah.
Right?
There's no identifiable perfect fifth either, right?
Right, yeah. Furthermore, the D fully diminished 7 is D, F, A flat, and B. If I play F fully diminished 7, I'm going to get F, A flat, C flat, a.k.a. B, right? And D. Same notes, right? And then if I play A flat fully diminished 7, I'm going to have A flat, C flat, aka B, E double flat, aka D, and F, right? So we those same notes create 4 diminished 7 chords, just based on which one you decide is the root.
Yes,
and you can't do that with a major chord, right? If I went C, E, G, C, and then went try to play a E major triad, E, G sharp, B, totally different notes, right? You can invert major chords, but you can't do that just spelling like that.
Yeah, it seems like really the fully diminished 7th chord is the main one that little phenomenon happens.
Yes, because it is a symmetrical chord.
Symmetrical, yes.
Incidentally, augmented chords also symmetrical. Divide the clock face into 3 equal parts instead of into 4. So
3 20-minute chords.
Yeah, exactly. So that's kind of what it is, and it does have roots back in the beginnings of tonality when we decided the fifth was a perfect interval. Perfect meaning there's no dissonance in it whatsoever. And then we added the third, which was mild dissonance, and then we decided that was consonant enough, and yeah.
Well, I was explaining to him also that if you have a fully diminished 7th chord, maybe not look at that chord, look at the chord that comes after it, right?
Right, yeah.
Because if you have a D fully diminished 7th resolving to a what, E flat.
Yeah, then the D was the root.
Then it was a D chord, right?
Yeah, if that D fully diminished 7 resolves to F sharp, then maybe it was F that was the root.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's fun.
Yeah. I hope that helped.
Yeah, the root, quote unquote, right?
Yeah.
We're just calling it the root because it's convenient.
Yeah, and I think early on I might have gotten the root and the bass confused a few times, but it's two different things. The bass is just the lowest note.
Sounding note.
Yeah. The root is the actual foundation of the chord.
Right, yeah. And William asked that question, too. Is it just the lowest sounding note? No. No.
Well, very good, man. Thank you, William.
Indeed, thanks. That was fun.
We enjoy engaging with our listeners, and sometimes this social section reveals actually some new theory knowledge or some clarifications on some theory knowledge.
That's why we keep doing it.
Exactly.
Well, one of the reasons we keep doing it.
Oh, yeah, we just also love hearing from our listeners.
That, too.
Okay, have we not put this off long enough, Matt?
I think we've put this off for like at least a year. Probably longer than that.
Yeah. I was just talking about the episode. Okay, so let's get into this, shall we?
Let's get into it.
First off, okay, I'm going to talk a little bit about his history. There's not a whole lot to say, really.
There's not a whole lot, and there's a lot of it that, we probably don't want to pull at too much.
Yeah. But yeah, what are we going to talk about today? What's the overview, if you can give like a elevator pitch of what this Schenkerian analysis is?
Anybody who knows anything about Schenker, if you get stuck in an elevator with them, will give you a different pitch. My elevator pitch is that Schenkerian analysis is the first attempt by a theorist to observe, analyze, and talk about the structural levels of a piece of music. That some notes perform a foreground, surface, decorative, make this piece of music role, while other notes sort of form the scaffolding and the foundations and the bones of the piece of music. Okay. That is my elevator pitch.
So when I look at it, I think to myself, we have this system of theory that we've spent centuries on.
Very long time.
And basically is what this whole show has been.
Pretty much.
Right, up until this point. And now I think what Schenker has done is he's kind of taken just a different lens to, or maybe that's a good analogy because he zooms out, he zooms in. But maybe it's I think it's a similar theory approach, but I think it goes back to the whole, when we were talking about how Casca Payne was more harmony-based, chord by chord by chord.
Yes.
And Roy Francoli's, the two texts that we teach from,
was
more counterpoint-based.
Counterpoint-based, yeah.
I think I just still don't have a full grasp of what exactly counterpoint is after doing all these episodes, like even 3 counterpoint episodes. It seems like some kind of magical force is what it seems like.
It really is kind of a magical force. There's something magic about counterpoint. Well, and you were not a fan of this theory when first exposed.
Nah.
Correct?
Nah.
Yeah.
It's still going to take some convincing.
It's still going to take a little convincing. That I love a challenge. I'll start with that whole counterpoint thing.
And I know some listeners are with me on this. I know it.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
But they did push play.
And you're still here, apparently. So I'll start with the counterpoint thing.
Okay.
When we did our 3 episodes of counterpoint, we talked about first species, second species, third, fourth species. And we may have briefly mentioned the existence of the 5th species, which is essentially just composing, just free composition. And there are a whole mess of rules to that. I mean, there were 3 episodes worth, right? Of just rules upon rules of, how notes can move against each other and still maintain independent melodic lines.
Yes, but still working together as a single force.
Yeah, sort of be a salad, right? Everything's individual, but it's all working together.
Oh yeah, that's
right?
nice. Okay.
Yeah. So, and it still be melodies that are independent of their own, and work that way, but they're still sort of working together in counterpoint, in conjunction, to create an entire piece of music. So there's all of those rules, like well, if it leaps by more than a perfect fifth, it has to, step down in the opposite direction, right?
That's right.
Dissonances can't be on a strong beat, et cetera, et cetera.
Parallel fifths,
no parallel fifths,
Parallel octaves,
no parallel octaves, right? Yeah, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. What we did say at the end of all that, and what we've said a couple of times since, is that harmony really comes from counterpoint, right? The reason we don't allow perfect fifths in Beethoven compositions, the reason Beethoven didn't do them, is because what Beethoven learned was counterpoint.
Yes.
He'd never heard of Cascapane.
Yeah, right.
What he studied was Fuchs's Gradus ad Parnassium, and probably a couple of the contrapuntalists that came after him. And he composed based off of that. So did Haydn, so did Mozart, so did Chopin, Schumann, Bach, all of these guys. So when we say, and it's very true, that Schenker is a counterpoint-based theory, what we are saying is that Schenker went all the way back, and he basically just fleshes that out.
He studied Fuchs, right? But he
yes, he did.
Same thing.
Really, what Schenker is doing is fleshing out and explaining how Beethoven is actually writing contrapuntally. In his deepest essence, that's kind of what he's doing. He's just sort of going back and explaining what we and a lot of theorists kind of take for granted, is that all of this really comes from counterpoint. Yeah.
Okay.
And it led him to some interesting places
when
he started doing that.
It's definitely a thing.
Yeah. So I don't, you might notice, if astute listeners might notice, we're not necessarily recommending that we go back and listen to those counterpoint episodes.
Oh, yeah, I was going to ask about that.
You certainly can. But all of those rules aren't necessarily going to help you understand Schenker immediately, Now, you to some extent, of course they will, right? It depends on how deep you want to understand it. But as far as your immediate exposition, I don't find that it will be super helpful to bog down on those counterpoint rules again. We did plenty.
Okay.
Right? Take it for granted that they're there. And take it for granted that Mozart and Bach are not going to break any of them in any significant way. One explanation one justification rather of Schenker that I've heard is that his theory kind of explains, well, you look at this Beethoven piece and he seems to be doing these things that are, completely against the fundamental laws of counterpoint. He breaks some kind of fundamental law. How do you do that? And maybe Schenker sort of helps explain that in a way.
Justify it
or explain how that is not, just Mozart writing bad music or whatever.
Okay.
I don't know, grain of salt. I've never really thought about Schenker that way. Maybe.
Well, let's get to know Schenker a little bit
better.
Let's
get to know this guy.
Heinrich Schenker was born on June 19th, 1868 in Austrian Galicia, which is basically current-day southeastern Poland.
Right.
So he was child number 5 of 6. Everyone had lots of kids back in those days.
Oh, yeah.
Both of his parents were of Jewish faith.
I did not know that.
And according to one account, he described his father to be serious and his mother to be hot-tempered. Not too much is known about his childhood beyond that.
Yeah.
He did study music at an early age, and he received a scholarship for the University of Vienna, where he studied piano with Ernst Ludwig, composition under Franz Kren, and harmony and counterpoint under Anton Bruckner.
Wow, so he studied under Bruckner.
Whom he would later criticize.
That doesn't super surprise me.
Yeah, these theory people butt heads, man.
Oh, yeah.
Imagine getting criticized by one of your students.
Bruckner is a famous composer. You can head to whatever your favorite music source is and listen to some Bruckner symphonies. They're famous, and they're quite long and quite huge and quite symphonic. And,
large in texture.
Oh yeah, big in scope. Yeah. But they're definitely there to be enjoyed.
Yeah, it's not like it's kind of tonal or diatonic, right?
I would call Bruckner's music very tonal. Yes.
Yeah.
In pretty much every sense of the word.
So anyways, he was also studying law, but he ended up going the musical direction after graduation. He found some work composing, conducting, and playing accompaniment.
I've never heard any of Schenker's compositions. What must that be like?
Well, he wasn't greatly renowned for any of these things.
Never.
Maybe he was like, okay, maybe I'm not so great at this. I'm just going to
Stick to theory.
stick to tearing it all down, analyzing it. That's okay. That's all right. Someone's got to do it.
Right.
That's why we're here, right?
I'm not renowned for any of those things either.
No, me neither. Okay, so after the turn of the 20th century, he kind of decided to go into a deep dig on the theory, like I said. Mm-hmm. And the system of analysis he developed was broken down into 3 volumes. Mm-hmm. The first was Harmony, which came out in 1906, and then Counterpoint, which came out in 1910, and then Free Composition, which came out in 1935.
Right.
Very soon before he passed away. I guess that would have been his magnum opus for a theorist.
That's probably the one that got him in the most trouble.
Yeah, or even just the whole 3-volume set, you know?
Yeah, that actually, I didn't realize that they were broken down into 3 books in that particular way, which makes me understand a little better some people's approach. You know, like, unfortunately, you yourself got exposed to somebody who's like bogging down on figured bass for 20 minutes before.
Oh, yeah.
That's probably his stuff from book 1, from Harmony, right?
I should say Matt is the one who's read all these textbooks. He recommended some good videos for me to watch.
All of the texts. I've read all of them.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
You seen this?
I've read some of the big ones.
Yeah. I've seen your bookshelf, man. But, yeah, I mean, basically, right after that, he passed away on January 14th, 1935. 42 years to the day before the birth of this theorist.
There you go.
Theory dude. I'm not a theorist.
Theory dude.
I'm a theory dude. So that's a little bit about his past. There is kind of like a discussion that was had a little bit later on where one theorist was saying that he had kind of racist overtones and superiority kind of language, you know?
We would be irresponsible if we completely ignored this.
Yeah.
It is...
Some of his contemporaries in that location had similar views.
Sure. It is pretty well known. I mean, it's not just somebody's opinion. It's pretty well known that he was a German nationalist.
Mm-hmm. To be born of 2 Jewish parents.
Which fascinates me. I didn't know that.
I thought I heard Hitler was somehow of Jewish descent.
I've heard that too. But yeah, a German nationalist, a racist, misogynist, who to at least some extent was setting out to prove the superiority of European music over all other kinds of music, number one, and quite specifically German music, even within European music, to prove that Bach, Haydn, Mozart, and Beethoven, and Chopin, who one of my advisors once called an honorary German as far as Schenker is concerned, to prove that these guys were writing the best kind of music possible and that all other music was inferior. So he had that idea. And while most theorists will say, well, okay, you know, but what's interesting to us is his theories, not how he felt or his worldview or all that. It's still, to me, it needs to be said that we're talking about the theories of a guy who could be a pretty nasty dude, especially by modern standards. You know, we don't really want to emulate his personal life or worldview at all.
Well, you know, his takedown of Bruckner was very intellectually written, but I could see where it might cut like a knife. And then you said he had problems with Schoenberg, right? He was like, he's going to be there, I'm not going to be there.
Yeah, those two hated each other. Yeah, if one of them was going to be at a function, the other one wasn't going to be, and you know, they got into some pretty heated knockdown, drag out fights about just what constituted good composition and how to look at compositions that were already extant, and yeah, those were two very competing theories. We'll probably talk about Schoenberg when we get into set theory, but those are just two completely different ideas about how music ought to be constructed going forward.
Yeah. But, many occasions we are able to separate the art from the artist.
Let's hope so.
Can we separate the art from the theorist? We're going to find out.
The theory from the theorist.
The theory from the theorist.
Yeah.
Okay, let's get into it, man.
Let's do so.
Okay, so this is the closest you're going to be to actually sitting in one of Matt's classrooms.
Yeah.
Because you normally don't have some student cracking jokes and interrupting you a lot, but I'll have it a little bit of
it
that.
occasionally happens.
I'll try and ask the pertinent questions here.
Excellent idea.
This is the first episode where I actually went to Matt's ahead of time. I had to go over to your place and have you sit here and kind of give me the skinny and kind of teach me a little bit more about this.
Actually, it isn't the first time. We did that before. We did that with the Circle of Fifths, I think.
Oh, maybe so.
Yeah.
That was only 6 years ago.
Yeah, right. Can you believe that? Okay, before we digress. So, here it goes. Introduction to Schenkerian analysis. So I'm going to start fairly simple. Mm-hmm. I'm going to start with something that hopefully, if you've been listening to the podcast up until now, is a fairly easy concept for you to wrap your brain around, and that is the neighbor note. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to stay in C for a minute. We're going to be in good old C.
And we talked about this on non-chord tones episode.
Yes, we did.
Yeah, neighbor note.
Neighbor notes, passing notes, pedal tones, those kinds of things. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to be in good old C.
Good old C.
Mm-hmm. C. Mm-hmm. Right. So if I'm playing a melody in C, whatever, right? That was horrible, but you get the idea. If I'm playing a melody in C, we pretty much understand this concept of a neighbor note, right? Where if I had played an E in that melody, so I just went from E to F back to E.
Okay.
AKA mi, fa, mi.
AKA 3-4-3.
AKA scale degree 3 to scale degree 4 to scale degree 3. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Very, very basic idea, right?
Yeah.
So we have kind of already trained ourselves to think about this neighbor note as a type of prolongation, right? We have prolonged the life of E by playing E and then moving up and then moving back down.
So far, so good.
So far, so good, right? So that prolongs the life of E. And we've used this word prolongation, like, things that prolong the tonic, right?
Yeah.
For example, right? Mm-hmm. That little 1-4-1 motion that's kind of prolonging the tonic, extending the tonic's life, and will eventually move to a dominant functioning or predominant functioning chord.
Yeah.
So this is sort of prolonging the life of E. Mm-hmm. Right?
So a Schenkerian would say that F does not exist because functionally it's more about that E?
When I am talking about Schenker, I censor myself a lot, and I will not use the term doesn't exist. Because one of the many, many, many misconceptions that happen over Schenker is people get the idea that he's trying to say, well, these notes aren't really there, or don't really exist, or aren't really important. Yeah, and people have a lot of cognitive dissonance with that because they say, no, wait, those notes are there. You can't tell me they're not important. They got written down on a piece of, right? So I will never say the word does not exist.
Okay.
What I will say is that in this case, that F's role, that neighbor note's role, is to prolong the life of E.
Okay.
In a counterpoint scenario, right? If this was second species counterpoint, right? Whatever. That would be third species counterpoint, but you get the idea. So what if we did this? What if we took our neighbor note that is a prolongation of E, and then prolonged that somehow? So we went, right? we're starting to make a real melody here, right? I mean, you can almost hear. Or whatever.
Okay.
Right? So, all right. So
you
now,
stuck more notes in between the two notes.
Yes. So now this prolongation itself has a prolongation.
Aha.
Itself has notes that are prolonging it.
The neighbor tone has neighbor tones within it.
Yes. So neighbor notes to a neighbor note. We've got the neighbor note, and then we've got, for right now, we'll just call it a little dealy. Right? We got this little dealy that is prolonging F in the same way F is in turn prolonging E.
Okay.
Right? So what have we done here? What we have done here is create a couple of different levels to this little thing we're doing, right? On the fundamental level, the lowest level we have E,
By just E.
which is being prolonged,
Yes.
right? And then on this next level, we have the thing that is immediately prolonging E, the F, scale degree 4. And then on the surface level, we have things that are then prolonging 4. And then we move back to E.
Okay.
So we have a sort of ground level, the sort of bones of the thing is E. And then we have this sort of middle level where we've got this F neighbor note, right, prolonging E. And then we've got the most surface, most foreground level, little dealy, which is in turn prolonging the F that is prolonging the E.
Yeah, but on the background level, the furthest far, what do you call it? The lower level?
Yes.
That F doesn't exist. And those chords do not exist. Those notes do not exist.
We're going to get our little curse word bleeper sound that we used to have and bleep out that word. Those words don't exist. Everything exists.
Okay.
They're just performing different roles.
I'm talking about on the analysis.
Me too.
Okay.
Everything exists. They're just performing different roles, and we're just choosing what level to look at and what notes to look at to discover what role this note is playing.
Okay.
Right now, right? Everything exists. It's all there. I wrote this whole thing, and you notice that it's the surface level stuff that's really the most fun, right?
Yeah.
It was a pretty boring melody until I heard, until I came up with some foreground level stuff, right? That's the most interesting part.
Totally.
Yeah.
That's what makes it music, right?
Absolutely.
In my opinion.
Yeah. So the original scale degree 3 in kind of a background level, the scale degree 4, the F on kind of a middle ground level, and it's a little dealy on the surface, right? So what if we harmonize that? So our original idea of a neighbor note, as you said, was in the episode called non-chord tones. So our original idea of a neighbor note then is a note not in the chord.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. What if we chose to harmonize that note and instead went, what would we do? Right? So now we have 1 4 1.
Okay.
Right? Is that F still a neighbor note?
I don't think it's still a neighbor note to the 1 chord because now we have a new chord.
Right. Very good. In one sense, no. Right? Because in our sense of having defined a neighbor note as a note that's not in the chord, well, this note is in the chord. So, no, it's no longer a neighbor note. But if I still did that, if I still went, right? Kind of starting to sound kind of pretty. Yeah. Then that F, while no longer a neighbor note, could still be described as having that same role, that same function melodically that it had originally, which was prolonging E.
Melodically or harmonically?
Melodically.
Okay.
It would have that role. It would have that role of, in a melodic sense, in a counterpoint sense, of being a prolongation to E, right? Which came from our tonic triad, that note. E did.
And we're talking about the F note or the F chord?
We're talking about the F note.
Okay.
Yeah. The F chord would now be what we call a neighbor chord.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
You got a whole chord that's a neighbor chord.
Yeah, Schenker's already starting to tick some people off,
Yeah,
right?
people like me.
So we have this neighbor chord. And just like, when we said just a minute ago that 1, 4, 1 is a prolongation of the tonic chord. Remember we said that.
Yeah.
Just a minute ago. EFE is a prolongation of the note from the tonic chord.
Yes.
E.
Okay.
So F is still a prolongation of E.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. How am I doing with you so far?
Okay, I got one. Let's see here. What do I have here? Prolongation. Oh, if the 4 had gone to 5, would that have changed its function to subdominant? And therefore be a new kind of thing. Yeah, it would have been, right? Because if it goes back to 1, that I can see where that's a prolongation of 1. Mm-hmm. If the 4 had gone to 5, then it changes function from a prolongation of 1 to, or does it do both? Maybe it's a prolongation, but also a subdominant.
That would be all about context.
I'm sorry, predominant.
Predominant, right?
Jeez.
If that would be all about context. You could claim. And then we land back on E with an imperfect authentic cadence. You could claim that that's all still prolonging 1.
I see.
On some level, right? Now, on one very, very surface level, yeah, that was tonic, predominant, dominant, tonic, just like we know these functions go. But then on some other level, that could have all been said to whatever I did. Mm-hmm. And then we land back on tonic, and presumably are going to go on with more music, right? So we could have still kind of said that on some level that is still a prolongation of 1.
Yeah.
We're getting ahead of ourselves, but I'm glad you brought that up because it's going to be a very, very important level later.
That does satisfy me because this passage has more one-ishness than it does anything else. There's
Absolutely.
a 1 at the beginning, there's a 1 at the end.
And you can kind of hear that.
It spends more time and energy on 1 than it does.
Spends more time and energy on 1. Okay. Absolutely. And you can sort of hear that, right? And this isn't super far beyond what we've done already before, right? Talking about functions and talking about the prolongation of the tonic chord. And it's also helpful to think of this way and to think of this in these different levels, right? There's nothing that doesn't exist. On one level, we did go tonic, predominant, dominant, and back to tonic.
On the surface.
But then on this separate level, and Roy Francoli talks about this kind of eloquently, actually. On this other level, we are prolonging tonic. This is a tonic functioning thing, and will be until when? Well, stay tuned. So, let me do what all of our listeners love and play piano.
Yeah, right.
So this is Bach's famous C major prelude. As butchered by me. Right? Yeah.
I thought that was nicely done.
Thank you. I only made one giant flub up, and a couple of little ones. So
missing one note is not butchering.
Yeah, but check out this upper note melody. We're in C major still. That is scale degree 3.
Okay.
So we're talking about the highest note that's getting played.
Okay.
And then look what happens. What happened?
It went up a step.
Went up a step. And then it's going to stay there for a minute. And then what?
Back down.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, there. So,
Okay.
right?
Uh-huh.
It is that same neighbor note motion, right? It is E up to F and back down to E.
Oh, how nice. You
It
got the
is just
same
writ.
notes too.
Yeah. It is just writ large.
Uh-huh, yeah, okay.
Yeah, it's just writ over 4 measures. This neighbor note took. Talk about prolonging, right?
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And then why are we using the highest note? Because it calls most of our attention and lands on the down, or...
Because we're going to call that our melody note, our soprano note in this texture.
That satisfies my curiosity.
Yeah. Speaking of texture, you may notice that these are just chords. C major.
Arpeggios, right?
Arpeggios. C major. Right? And then we've got a little 2-4-2 in here. Right?
Yeah. 2 in inversion.
Yeah. Then we have a 5, looks like a 5-6-5, doesn't it?
Another inverted chord.
Actually, yeah, that makes it a 5-6-5. And then back. Well,
Listen to our episode on figured bass if you didn't know what he was just talking about.
absolutely. Listen to our episode on another of Jeremy's favorites is figured bass.
Oh, yeah.
So, these are just chords. And, we just play these chords. And if you were to analyze these chords, you could play these as the simultaneities. Mm-hmm. Right? And they make perfect sense.
Absolutely.
And they make perfect theory sense. There isn't even any parallel fifths or anything. You could crunch them all together on the downbeat of every measure, and you would have a chord progression just like you'd write in theory 1 or 2, right?
Like what we just heard, you're doing block chords, right?
Yeah. Soprano, alto, tenor, bass. The soprano is doubled in the octave, so you are getting I'm pretty sure. But yeah, basic stuff. A lot of Bach's music is actually like this, right? So one of my favorites, Bach's 2-part Invention. These are just 2 voices, right? They kind of move, and they do this little double note thing, this little neighbor note thing all the time, and just move in these different contrapuntal ways. But they always you could still crunch them up, and make chords.
Okay.
Just with neighbor notes, surface level neighbor notes, right? So these are just harmonic chords. Schenker calls this a horizontalization.
Okay.
They can be thought of as a 4-voice harmony that follows all the rules of counterpoint, all the rules of Roman numeral tonal function, like we've learned, right? It went 1, 2, 4, 2 to 5, 6, 5 to 1. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Right? All of those things still work. It's just instead of playing block chords, we sort of stretched them out. Right? Let's look at some of the notes.
Okay.
This is famous. Everybody knows that, right? This is Beethoven's Ode to Joy, a very well-known, very simple melody. Notice again, so this time we're in the key of D. Right? And notice again, we have this scale degree 3 at the beginning. Right? And this time, like you were sort of hypothesizing before, it's going to reach all the way up to 5. Right? Before moving all the way back down to 1.
Okay.
Right? And then back up to 3. Before finally hitting that half cadence at 2. Right? So here, our scale degree 4 actually is a passing tone. Right? Whereas there was a neighbor tone before. Right?
So being that the neighbor tone returns back to the note it came from, but where the passing tone moves on to another.
Exactly.
Up the next third or whatever.
Right, exactly.
Okay, so we got passing tone situation here.
We have a passing tone situation here. Right, for scale degree 3, passing tone to 5. Yeah. And then we're kind of going to fall back down to 1. And then back up to 3. We're kind of still floating around 3, right? We're kind of going up and going down.
And I guess we're also calling that 2 a passing tone?
We'll deal with the 2 in a second.
All right. It's not that simple, is it?
Yeah. So this 3...
The 2 passing between 3 and 1.
We'll still have to deal with that in a minute. Yes. Yeah. It's a passing tone on a level. Yeah.
Okay. It's like, I don't know anything. Carry on. I interrupted.
But this 3, back down and up, we're kind of flitting in and around 3. You see that? Mm-hmm. So we still can maybe think of this as prolonging 3, yeah? Mm-hmm. In this sense, we're prolonging 3 with this little progression up, right? And then falling all the way back down before it's climbing back up to 3. Yeah. And then that last 2, at that point, are we still prolonging 3, right? On some level, maybe yes, but it's pretty clear at that point that we've reached a half cadence.
Yeah,
right?
It changes moods at that point.
Yeah.
Even that little melody changes moods at that point, kind of.
Oh yeah. And that's where the 5 happens, right? On that scale degree 2.
The 5 chord.
The 5 chord. Right? So that's kind of a special thing. But we can still say that everything is prolonging 3, at least up until that half cadence, right? Mm-hmm. And then the half cadence is a 3 moving to 2. So this is sort of the origin in Schenker's mind of the idea of dominant function.
Okay.
Because once we are no longer prolonging 3, we're really no longer prolonging the tonic triad.
Okay.
Right? Yeah. Everything up to here can be said to be prolonging not just 3 melodically, but harmonically the tonic triad, right?
Yes.
You can even call this a type of horizontalization of the tonic triad, right? Because there's the tonic triad. We started, right? We just sort of stretch that out and put some passing tones in, right? Mm-hmm. So we're still horizontalizing our tonic triad,
okay,
right? And in horizontalizing that tonic triad, we are prolonging the tonic triad. It's only when we get to that last 2, it's only until we get to that last 2 that, you can make them, okay, at least on some level, we're not we've reached a different function, right? Mm. So that, you could think of that 3, which is structurally have been prolonging. Now that 2 is something different. That 2 is a new thing, right? Mm-hmm. A little bit. Probably a thing that Schenker would say exists on the same structural level as the 3. Which is a way of saying it's not prolonging 3. We haven't gone up a level. That 3 and 2 are on the same level.
Okay.
And are eventually going to get to 1. But yeah.
Would that be one of the middle levels?
Yes.
Okay.
That would be probably a more background level. Then like the 2 that came before it, you said that is like a passing tone, just falling all the way back down to 1, right?
In that instance, had he had landed on 4 or 6, scale degrees 4 or 6. I'm sorry, 5 or 7.
Yeah.
It would have been the same situation, right? It would still be changing the function. It's because it's a chord member of the 5 chord. It's a tone of the 5 chord.
Yes, especially if he had landed on. Well, yeah. It's an interesting notion. 5 is also a member of the tonic triad.
Yeah.
So it would have just kind of depended on context there.
Yeah.
For what it's worth, and I hope this isn't too confusing. And if it's too confusing, just hit your 10-second skip button. Mm-hmm. But on some level, the 3 to 2 is also prolonging the tonic triad, right? On the most fundamental level, we're going to learn that 2 is prolonging the tonic triad. So if he had gone up to 5, still prolonging the tonic triad, the 2 just makes more kind of middle ground and foreground level funness.
In which case, maybe the 5 wouldn't come in until the dun 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 dun.
Yeah, but we talk about, how long are you going to prolong a tonic triad, right?
I don't know. I guess it depends on how far you zoom out.
And still prolonging the tonic triad all the way through that half cadence.
I'll buy that.
And then we go to the next phrase. Yeah, 2, is that really a passing tone? Back up to 3. And was this 2 all along, just trying to find 1? Mm-hmm. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so how long are we really prolonging the tonic triad?
I mean...
It's one of those controversial ideas.
Right.
That gives people fits. Because if you're not thinking about these things on multiple levels, this is going to give you fits. Because on one sense, that was a 5 chord, that was a half cadence. We're not on the 1 chord anymore, right, on the surface. So you've got to think, on the deeper level, are we still what's still going on, right? And then on the deepest level, what's still going on? Mm-hmm. So there you go. If that was too confusing, just don't even worry about it.
Got it.
Moving on.
I didn't have my own fast forward button, so but it made sense to me.
Yeah. For what it's worth, just as we're able to harmonize neighbor notes, we're able to harmonize passing notes too, right? And sort of make middle ground level stuff out of them, just like we did that F in the very beginning, sort of harmonize that neighbor note. We can also harmonize passing notes. Very, very, very common example, 1 to 5, 6, 4 to 1, right? Where you sort of go, let me do this correctly here. Mm-hmm. Right? 1, 5, 6, 4, 1, 6, right? Mm-hmm. And so we had passing tones both in the bass, scale degree 1, passing tone 2 to 3, right? And also in the upper voice, scale degree 3, passing tone down to 2 to 1.
Okay.
So, and then, these octave E passing tones, harmonized by a second inversion 5 chord.
Okay.
Right? Almost all I even really had to do is just keep playing 5. We call this a voice exchange, right? Where the bass went from D up to F sharp and the soprano went from F sharp down to D.
Okay.
So they sort of traded notes.
They're not just notes, but textures, like voices, right?
Yes.
Maybe not textures, but...
Yes. And what triad would we be prolonging if we did that chord progression?
1.
There you go. There you go. So is that 5, 6, 4 a dominant function?
I mean, I would say in the moment, yes, it is. Because if you just count those 3 chords, and you got a 1 and then a 5 and a 1, then what happened was, what you just witnessed was a tonic to dominant to tonic.
Yes. But does that feel like a half cadence, though?
Nah.
No. So yeah. So on one level, yes, it is still a dominant function. Mm-hmm. But on another level, we started with a 1, we ended with a 1, 6. Mm-hmm. Are we on a deeper level not still prolonging 1?
That's a very good question, and I'm not sure if I know the answer. Schenker would probably say that we have been.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. He would consider those passing tones to be middle ground level elements that are harmonized. Mm-hmm. Remember, Schenker is all about counterpoint, right? And this is beautiful counterpoint, right? That is beautiful first species counterpoint, right? And, to Schenker, all of this came from counterpoint. So what are the chords? Well, the chords are just harmonizations. Like I said, all I really had to do was just keep playing 5, which is consonant to everything I'm playing. So, just keep it there. Right? So we have just harmonized this contrapuntal motion. Right? But this is still the prolongation of the tonic.
Okay.
Right? These are the basic ideas of Schenker at this point.
Okay.
The idea that things happen on the surface, melodies happen, neighbor notes and passing tones happen, harmonies and function happen. But then at a middle ground level, other things are happening. Prolongations are happening. And then at the deepest level, something very, very fundamental is happening.
We mentioned these levels just in casual conversation, but these are actual terms of Schenker's,
Yes.
right? Can we hit those real quick?
Translated into English,
Oh, sure. Why not?
they are the foreground,
Yeah.
which is the absolute surface, right? They are the middle ground, which is sort of the middle sort of scaffolding of the piece, where some of the sort of interesting structural things go on. And then there is the background, the very, very fundamental thing that's going on.
You made a band analogy, didn't you? Is that a good one? Like the lead singer would be the foreground.
Oh, yeah, right. So think of the foreground as sort of the lead singer. Right? Everybody notices the lead singer. And, they're usually pretty flashy, and they're singing, and they're listening, and they're singing all the words, and they're sort of at the forefront, right? And then think of the middle ground as, sort of the guitar players and the keyboard player, right? They're sort of providing that, that support for the singer, right? And then the background is sort of like the bassist and drummer, right? They're holding everything together at the basic level.
Absolutely. But I guess avoiding analogies, maybe we could just say that the surface level, the foreground, is what we're hearing, the actual music piece, the notation, all the notes involved, all the slurs, everything.
Yes, the foreground is what makes Mozart's K45 movement 2 Mozart's K45 movement 2 and not something else.
Okay, and then the middle ground, and there can be a few different middle ground levels, right?
There can be as many as you need.
But okay, for analysis.
Structural theorists do not limit at all, put any kind of cap on the number of middle grounds required. They want you to be very careful that you understand what is operating on the same level versus what is happening on different ones. But there is really no limit to how many middle grounds you have. It's just the level of detail you want.
And then, of course, the background is just that concrete slab that we put the house on.
Yeah,
right.
And we'll talk about that in a minute / in part 2 or.
Okay. Perfect.
Yeah.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify that.
Yeah. So that's the idea that musical material is generated by counterpoint, not just in the short note to note to note to note term. Because like in note to note to note, that chord progression was tonic, dominant, tonic, right? But Schenker's big idea is that it's not just a note to note or a chord to chord thing, but over the long term, there are other things happening, and those long term things we talk about as being on lower levels, middle ground and background.
Okay.
And they form structural components. And those structural components in their nature are derived from species counterpoint. Right?
Very good.
And conform to species counterpoint was his big assertion.
Because when he's saying this about music, it's not really all music. I mean, some people could squint their theory brains and probably relate this to all music, but it's really mainly 18th, 19th century European.
That's,
is it not?
It's funny. That's a funny thing. I have definitely noticed that even people who claim to put no stock in Schenker at all still love to think this way about any kind of music whatsoever.
Okay.
Peter Van den Toorn, who is famous for, among many things, analyzing Stravinsky and, sussing out all the octatonic collections in Stravinsky. I don't know how he feels about Schenker in terms of tonal music, but I definitely know how Schenker felt about Stravinsky. He just had to conclude it was bad music because it didn't conform to any of these theories.
Yeah.
Right? And Peter Van den Toren, you would think in analyzing Stravinsky, then would find Schenker utterly useless. But he still sort of has a way of thinking this way. Thinking, well, on some level, this melody is an octatonic pitch collection, right? Once you get on that on some level thing, you're sort of thinking in Schenkerian terms, even if you're not using his specific theories. I think his theories specifically do, mostly relate to Western classical music and German classical music specifically, right? But that idea that music has sort of fundamental underpinnings is something that you can apply to anything.
It's like, yes, you could apply 151 to a lot of things. Life and death. You are born, that's the 1. 5 is your life. 1 is your death again. You breathe in, there's your 1. No, you're 5. You breathe out, there's your 1. Or however you want to put it, right?
Right.
So on some level, right, you can start thinking like this. And I do appreciate that idea when you relating a lot of things together and zooming out for the bigger view, the grand view.
Yeah.
But
absolutely. I have heard theories where the 1 is birth and then 5 is death and then the second one is resurrection.
Okay, well, if you believe in an afterlife, that's obviously that's how it's going to go.
Right, yeah. and that's a whole other podcast for other people even, right? Like go listen to This Jungian Life podcast or something to get but yeah, so it's funny about where does this apply? It depends on, how loosely you want to take it, right?
Right. Again, this is all theory, right?
Music
theory.
A lot of people think Freud was a nutcase, but everybody believes in psychology, right?
That's true.
So even if his specific theories are kind of nuts, or a lot of people don't feel like they're accurate.
Just a little off in some ways. And
yeah. But we all still believe in psychology, of which he was the godfather.
That's
right?
the name that comes up when people say psychology. That's just the name that comes up.
Yeah.
No one's saying Skinner. Even though Skinner did some really great stuff.
Or Jung, even.
Yeah.
Although I've just mentioned him twice. Okay, anyway. Digression. So what are we trying to say here?
Are you asking me?
Yes, I'm asking.
Are you about to tell us?
No, that's not rhetorical. I'm asking. What are we trying to say here, Jeremy?
What are we trying to say here?
Yeah. You're trying to say you don't like Schenker, but... what are we trying to...
I'm saying that, we're trying to explain this method of analysis.
And what is that method of analysis trying to say?
Well, I still kind of feel like it's just kind of zooming out and simplifying and hacking off all the parts that don't need to be there for the purpose of analysis.
For the purpose of analysis, I'll allow some rather brutal language up before that phrase.
Yeah. Does that sound about right?
What we're trying to say is that music is not just a random note-to-note-to-note thing, nor is it just a random chord-to-chord-to-chord thing. There is a fundamental scaffolding, a fundamental structure that supports it and makes it intelligible to us. And however much fun the foreground is definitely fun. And all that fun is based on some admittedly less fun scaffolding structure. And that structure is the tonic triad. Ultimately, the structure of tonal music is the tonic triad. And the very next most significant chord is the 5. That 1-5-1 underpins everything.
I don't think that like harmony people like Koskapane and whatever. Maybe probably myself. I might just be a harmony person rather than a counterpoint person. They're not saying that you're just throwing all these chords together rando. The function still exists. There's a purpose for all these chords to be there that we've labeled, right?
Yes.
What is the difference between counterpoint people ultimately and harmony people?
Ultimately, we're all looking at the same piece of music. What I find is that harmony people will absolutely say, no, it's not just rando. 2/6 is followed by 5, and 5 is followed by 1, right? German augmented sixes resolve to 1, 6, 4, and 5. There are reasons they do that, right? So no, they're not just rando. To my way of thinking, and I don't need any haters. I'm just kidding. Right in with your thoughts. I'd love to hear it.
Only good thoughts. Good thoughts only.
No. Disagree with me. No theorist is ever really sad when somebody disagrees with them. But here we go. So to my way of thinking, where those harmony people stop is where the counterpoint people, including Schenker, pick up. So 2/6 follows 5, and 2/6 is followed by 5 is followed by 1. There's a reason for that. It's not just because that happens to. We didn't just land on that combination out of sheer luck. And the reason for that is contrapuntal. The reason 2/6/5 is followed by 5 is because that 5 is an underpinning to the prolongation of the tonic triad. The reason that 5 is followed by 1 is because as an underpinning to that tonic triad, it is compelled by the laws of counterpoint to pull that way.
Which kind of draws from the whole overtone series.
Yes.
Right? So the laws of counterpoint are very much physically involved with music itself and how music works.
That gets a little shaky. But we can at least say that these laws of counterpoint go all the way back to the first monks in the Middle Ages who started singing different notes at the same time. That a 5 is comprised of notes that are neighbor notes to 1. Right? So there's a reason 5 pulls to 1. Those neighbor notes pull towards their resolution.
Something just clicked just then. So maybe there'll be more clicking.
Yeah. So, those notes pull towards their resolution. And that that resolution is 1. So when you start a piece of music on scale degree 3, that 3 is wanting to fall to 2, and that 2 is wanting to fall to 1. It's just a question of how long it's going to take and what all kind of fun stuff are we going to have along the journey. Right? And this is the idea of counterpoint, or harmonize with is basic counterpoint, right?
Yeah.
And that's what drives this music, not only on the surface level, but on a deep level.
And that is outlining a 1-5-1.
Yes.
So earlier in the show where you heard me say, everything is just a 1-5-1 progression, kind of oversimplifying my understanding of Schenker.
Yes.
That is still kind of what he's saying.
That is still kind of what he's saying. Now, does that mean we can just go, we can just... Thank you, good night.
Oh, what do you call that one?
Yeah. Right, yeah. No, obviously not.
Encore.
Right? No, you can't do that any more than you could build the foundation to a house and bring all your furniture and sit in it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Have the housewarming party on the concrete block.
Right, yeah, on the concrete slab. Yeah, no. But it is saying that concrete slab is there underpinning all the fun stuff. Yeah.
All right, well.
There you go.
We covered a lot in this episode.
And we have so much more to talk about.
Yeah.
Figured bass, the interruption, which we touched on, examples of the bass arpeggiation, to say nothing of the initial ascent, arpeggiated ascent, unfoldings, voice exchange, register shifts, couplings, superposition, the reaching over, compound melodies, etc., etc., etc. Getting into how Schenker applies to binary forms, to sonata form, to rondo, even getting into polytonal structures, which is where I took it in my dissertation, right?
Yeah, and then also the repurposing of common musical items we know to be like stems and slurs and so forth.
Oh, and the notation. He's famous for the notation. He's famous for the notation.
That's going to take some getting used to for me, but the more I look at it, the more it starts to make a little bit of sense.
Yeah, you got to learn all the signs and symbols and what the notations are trying to tell you.
Wavy, dotty lines and stuff like arrows and all that jazz.
Yeah, big, half notes. They've got the beams that go all the way across a whole bunch of other notes and get connected to some other note. Way down the line. Yeah, all that stuff. He's famous for that. I think a lot of people don't like Schenker just because the notation is confusing.
It can be a little cumbersome, but perhaps as we go through this rabbit hole together, it'll all make sense on the other end.
Absolutely. I look forward to it. Passionately.
Yeah. High passion, low stakes, right?
High passion, low stakes.
We'll be back, guys, and we'll get more into that in future episodes.
Stay tuned.
As our impassioned Dr. Phillips just said, there is so much more to say about this system. So, buckle up and keep on listening. For ways to support us financially, click on the donate page of our website at musicstudent101.com. If you're listening on YouTube, be sure to like, subscribe, and share. And for questions or comments, write to us at info@musicstudent101.com.